Hey, everybody, welcome to our sports show for a View from the Pew. I'm Chris. I got Mike with me. We are kind of extending what we do on Mahoney Matters. We do a lot of talk there about some of the local high school football as well as Youngstown State. But we wanted to share this to a broader audience because I know anytime we talk about the Browns, the Steelers, the Buckeyes, and the Guardians, sometimes there's people from all over the state that like it. They may not want to hear as much about Youngstown State or Mahoning Valley football. So we're here to share some extra stuff about sports. Mike, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Chris. I'm always doing great in football season.
Now, I agree with you. Football season's great, but for fans here in Ohio, it wasn't really a great day on Sunday for a lot of people. The Browns, man, I don't know what to say about them. They have one of those games, and we talked about this. Sometimes there's games where you look at it and you say, hey, if we're going to have a successful win or a successful season, here's a game that we should win. Unfortunately, it didn't happen on Sunday. Browns lose 21-15 to the Giants. I got to tell you, if you look at the Giants the first week of the year, you say, oh, my goodness, how can they beat anybody? The Giants played better last week against the Commanders. Mm-hmm. They played well enough to win against the Browns. But still, you got to look at the Browns and say, man, what happened there?
Well, I think they've got a lot of question mark. For one, for only being 3 games in, they are decimated by injuries, Chris. And a lot of their guys didn't play in the preseason. And so they were kind of rusty to begin. And then now they've got injuries. And they've got a tough schedule. I realize, the next couple games are winnable games, but they're on the road. But man, I tell you what, I think it could be a rough season. And I know there were a lot of expectations, but this team still has, in my mind, a lot of question marks that need to be answered positively for them to be in the thick. The AFC North is tough. The Steelers are sitting there undefeated, and the Ravens. The Ravens are eventually going to be the Ravens. They finally got a win yesterday, but man, it's a tough division.
Yeah, who do the Browns have next? I don't have their schedule right in front of me.
I believe they go on the road. I know they've got the Commanders. I think that's not this week, but I believe they go on the road the next 2 weeks, and the Commanders are one of those games, but not this week.
Okay, yeah, let me check that. I have a bunch of notes in front of me. I forgot to put my Browns note on. So my apologies for that. Yeah, next week. This isn't good.
They go to Vegas, I think it is. Vegas.
Yeah.
And then I think they've got the Commanders. I believe it is.
I will say in general, it has been a very weird NFL season. And let's look at the Raiders as an example. Carolina looked terrible the first 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. They made a quarterback change. They benched their kind of young hotshot, guy in Bryant Young. They actually brought in the red rifle, Andy Dalton. Obviously, a lot of Ohio fans remember him from his days with the Bengals. Man, Dalton had a good game for Carolina. Carolina beat up on the Raiders pretty good.
Yeah.
But you see in the NFL, there are
week it makes no sense. Yep. You never know what to expect.
Prime example, Dallas looked like a Super Bowl contenders against the Browns, and then they've struggled. So could this be a bounce back game for the Raiders? I know their coach, Antonio Pierce, really called out a lot of the players. And the discussion I'm hearing today on some talk shows is, okay, it goes one of 2 ways. Either the guys are like, oh, my goodness, we stink. We've got to be better. So they come back and play hard. Good example of Carolina. When they stunk the first 2 weeks, they came back at a decisive win over Las Vegas. Or the players bounce back and say, hey, enough of this, coach. We're out. And they give up on the season. Yeah. Who knows? It'll be interesting to see how the Raiders come back.
There's so much parity in the NFL. We talked about this. I mean, you have probably about 4 teams that are going to be in the upper echelon of the league every year. And then you have a whole bunch of teams that, depending on the week, it could go either way. And usually most of these NFL games come down to the last 2 minutes. You can turn them on the last 2 minutes, and that's where it's going to be decided. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But there'll be a lot of good games. If you like a game that's competitive and you don't know who's going to win, this is nirvana for an NFL fan.
No, that's a good point. And the Raiders have looked really good. I mean, geez, the week before the Raiders went on the road and they beat Baltimore. And I know Baltimore may not be where they've been in the past, but that's still a good win, no matter what.
Absolutely.
I will tell you though, you said 2 weeks. I'm actually seeing here 3 weeks on the
3
road.
weeks, I think they're on the road.
Yeah.
Yep.
They after that they go play Washington.
Yep.
Then they go play Philadelphia. Now,
Yeah.
Philadelphia had a pretty good win over the Saints yesterday.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think the Eagles might be back too. So it's going to be tough. And, the road doesn't get super easier from there because they go home and play a pretty good Bengals team.
Yeah.
And a pretty good Ravens team. I know you might be like, hey, the Ravens won the first game yesterday. I wouldn't count the Ravens or Bengals as a win.
I think they'll be right there. They're just that's a beautiful organization. They'll be right there when it's all said and done. I'll be surprised if they're not a playoff team when it's all said and done. And I think the Browns are going to look back on that Giants game as one of those games when you look back and say, man, what were we doing? That was a winnable game. They were a 6.5 point favorite and lost and didn't look good. I mean, the second half they looked fine, but man, that first half they looked awful on both sides of the ball. They looked like they were totally unprepared for that game. And you get behind the 8 ball and you have an offense that doesn't score a whole lot. And you gave up those touchdowns early, and then you're playing catch up. And I don't think they have the kind of offense to play catch up. They need that to hold a team under 20 for their offense to have a shot. And unless that offense, the scoring improves for that offense, that's where it's at right now.
Well, and again, you got to look at it. You can't just point the finger at Deshaun Watson. But you got to look at
not getting any protection. They'd have to have tackles, and you got to have tackles. You got to have on your islands. You got to have good tackles, and they're all banged up. They were moving a guard to the tackle position. That was the case on Sunday. So when you're doing that, that's not a good sign. But I'm worried about them coming into this year because some of those knee injuries they had to key guys last year were a 1-year rehab, and they happened during last season. So those guys like Jack Conklin and stuff like that, those guys are still rehabbing. They don't have them. And if you get off, say if they lose the next 2 road games or 2 of the next 3, now you're chasing the schedule for wins. And in that division, that's a tough thing to do.
Well, and I'll tell you something too. And again, I'm a little biased because I'm coming at you as a Steelers fan. Maybe Deshaun Watson isn't a franchise quarterback, and he's done nothing since he's come to Cleveland to say he's a franchise quarterback. But if you're a franchise quarterback, you're a franchise basketball player, or whatever the case might be, you've got to say, okay, my guys stink around me. I'm going to do something to help us win. And I'm just not seeing Deshaun Watson right now playing like that. And that's a hard thing to ask for. Not everybody can do that. That's why, there's certain franchise players. Not everyone could be a franchise player. But sometimes you have to have that where you're like, man, like Big Ben, there were things I didn't like about Big Ben for his career for the Steelers. But the thing that stuck out with Big Ben was there was games like yesterday where the team was stinking, their offensive line was stinking, maybe the defense wasn't playing well, and he did something that he kind of pulled out of his backside where they got the win. And again, I know sometimes it doesn't happen. I know Big Ben lost some games, sure won. I get that. But with Deshaun, I just don't see that from him since he's come to Cleveland. Where's that game? That's where I question him sometimes.
Yeah, he's a rhythm quarterback, though, Chris. And the fact that he didn't play anything in the preseason, I think this is a guy. Take this prediction from me, and I could be wrong on this, but I think as he plays more, as long as with this decimated offensive line, if he doesn't end up getting injured, which we certainly hope he doesn't, I think you'll see him get better. But I just worry about the Browns. I'm worried if they end up starting out the season like 1-3, 1-4, that makes it tough because then you have to go into the meat of the AFC North schedule, and that's always a grinder. So if you start out 1-3 or 1-4, that's really tough to do. But I do think Watson will get better as he plays more. He's a rhythm quarterback. If you'll notice last year, he was starting to play better and better as he got more reps, and then he got hurt again. So now we're doing the same thing now. We're trying, but the trouble is because they've lost really at one game they should have won for sure, and they look bad in the Cowboys game too. I'm just like now they're chasing things. So they're going to have to find something on the road the next 3 weeks that they haven't shown at home. So, but I do think Watson will get better as he gets more reps.
The skill players don't really help out Watson either. I mean, Amari Cooper had a really good game.
Yeah.
7 for 86, 2 touchdowns. But aside from him, I mean,
you know what's amazing? As badly as they played, especially in that first half, they could have won that game if they don't have that.
Right.
They were driving the ball.
Right.
It's amazing. But it is what it is. You know what they say. Your record is what it is, and that they're a 1-2 football team. So, and that's about what they've looked like, a 1-2 football team.
Well, you got to see some of these skill players step up. I mean, geez, Jerome Ford, 37 yards. That doesn't help you.
Well, it kills them now. They don't have Nick Chubb because with Nick Chubb, you have that running game you can lean on, and that takes a little pressure off the passing game. You can see teams aren't fearing the Browns' running game right now, and deservedly so, I guess. So they're sitting on that pass, and plus with the tackles both out, that you saw what the Giants were doing. They were just bull rushing on every play. I think Watson was sacked. Was it 8 times on Sunday?
Yeah.
So, the poor guy's running for his life. So they've got a lot of question marks, like I said, that are going to have to be answered in the next few weeks, or it might not be anything close to the season the Browns fans were hoping for. And I'm saying that as a Browns fan.
Well, and again, like I look at guys like Jerry Jeudy, and again, you don't have a running game. Your quarterback's running for the life, so you can't always count on your wide receiver 2 to do a lot.
Yeah.
4 catches for 27 yards. And again, you can't always have 100 yards from your receiver. I get that. But when you have a lot of those guys playing like that, when you have a line the way you are, it's just not a recipe for wins.
I didn't think it was a very good game called by Stefanski again. One thing, when they had Flacco last year, they were a vertical passing football team. Now, with this and Stefanski calling the plays, they're going side to side. And you'll see that yards come down for those receivers because they're not going vertically down the field very much. For one thing, they got the injuries on the line where the quarterback doesn't even have time to set up the throw downfield. But I do think Stefanski, he's a kind of a side-to-side, throw the ball, dink and duck quarterback. And I don't know. It's not like an overwhelming offense to watch right now.
The Giants have their issues, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you the Giants look great. But man, Malik Neighbors is a whale of a receiver.
Oh, that one catch he had in the end zone, that was spectacular.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to say anything else about the Giants' offense because they have Daniel Jones isn't your quarterback. I totally get that.
He sure looked good yesterday. I'll tell you that, man.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the other thing that turned that game. The Browns get that. They are up 7-0. They get that interception. They're going to have the ball inside the 30-yard line. And the guy hits the quarterback in the head, and it nullifies everything. Think about that. If the Browns go up 14-0 early on, that might be a whole different game. But because of that, then the Giants took it the length of field, tied the game, and we know how the rest of it played out. So, you've got to be disciplined. You can't make those mistakes, especially when you're a team that has a small margin for error. And I think the Browns fall in that category right now.
Yeah, definitely. And we could talk all day about the Browns, but we need to finish up some of these other teams. Steelers, man, they're getting banged up, but man, 3-0, and you could say what you want about the first 2 games, but man, that game yesterday was pretty impressive against the Chargers.
Yep, and they got that good defense. I'm telling you, they got really good defense, and as long as they can keep teams under the 20, and they usually do, they're going to win a lot of football games.
It didn't help the Chargers when the quarterback went out in the third quarter, so that kind of had a thing to play. But my goodness, I saw a stat they outgained the Chargers in the second half, like 250 to -5. It was just the second half was just unbelievable.
Yep.
I will say a lot with Justin Fields has come to critique. I don't think Justin Fields needs to be Pat Mahomes.
No,
I don't think he ever will be Pat Mahomes.
He needs to be a game manager. That's it, and he's doing a good job of that.
Well, and I'm telling guys on my Steelers podcast, I say, hey, if he can score 20 points, and again, that's not really asking for a lot in the NFL.
Yeah.
You put your team at a good place to win a lot of football games.
Absolutely. And
game 1 and 2, he didn't.
Yeah.
Right. Game 1 and 2, he didn't. But, man, if you look at these stats, 25 for 32, 78% completion percentage, 245 yards. Again, let's don't put him in the Hall of Fame about yesterday. But again, if you can make a performance like that with a defense like you did, you're going to win some games.
And I
Um,
think that's what Tomlin sees too. We
yeah,
they don't need the guy to be all pro or anything like that. They just need him to be a game man. And I think he's doing a good job of that. And with that
here's
defense, yeah.
yeah. Well, and here's the thing I like about his performance too. The critique on Justin Fields of the Bears and coming in this year is, hey, he's a turnover machine. First
Because
two
he was
games,
with the Bears. That's
right?
why.
Well, but sometimes when he turns the ball, he gets frustrated, he pushes
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
it just leads to bad stuff.
Mhm.
First two games, no turnovers. He had turnover earlier in the game, and I saw that turnover. I'm like, oh, here we go. What's going to happen? No more turnovers.
Right.
He ended up the game 25 for 32.
Yep.
So how he bounced back was good. Something else that a lot of people will overlook, he's a fast guy, a running quarterback. Sometimes with a running quarterback, they don't throw for as many yards, but you say, well, they got 50 yards rushing, whatever the case might be. Mike, he only had 6 yards of rushing yesterday.
Yeah.
Which, again, you might sit and say, well, you should have ran the ball more. No, I think it made for an even better quarterback performance. They didn't have to rely on his legs. He still played well. And that's good, too.
Yep, I totally agree with that. Yep.
The Steelers, lots of good things going on for him. Only concern I have, injuries are starting to mount up a little bit. Jalen Warren, who's arguably the best running back, limited to 3 carries. He's really not doing well on defense. Alex Highsmith, who's a really good linebacker, he's out. He might be out for a little while. Troy Fontenot, who was their first-round draft pick, he was starting for the team.
Yeah.
He's out. He could miss the season. Yeah. Now, I will say for the Steelers, they're deep in spots. Nick Herbig, Mike, he was a mid-round draft pick last year. Nobody knew if he was going to play inside or outside linebacker.
Yeah.
I saw him play outside linebacker in the training camp for the Steelers last year. He was beating their starting offensive lineman routinely. Yeah. He came in, he had 2 sacks for the Steelers. Him and TJ Watt are going to be amazing together, but they're losing some of that depth. So they need to not have, they're going to get into depth issues if they're not careful. But so far, they're looking good overall.
The Steelers know how to draft, especially on defense. They draft guys who play with an edge. And, that's like old school NFL football. I love to watch that. And I'm saying that as a Browns fan, but man, I'd like to see the Browns play with that. And the Browns have the talent on defense too, but sometimes I don't know if they play with that edge that they need to. But man, the Steelers play with an edge. If you beat them, you have really earned it. So they play really good defense.
Here's the other thing to kind of watch out for. The Steelers haven't had a second receiver so far. Calvin Austin, he's a mid-round draft pick from 3 years ago. He really hasn't broke out as much, but he had a really good game yesterday. He had a 55-yard touchdown reception, 95 yards of receiving. I don't know if he can keep that up, but the interesting thing is the Steelers are 3-0, Mike.
Yeah.
They go to Indianapolis, which is a winnable game. Yeah. Then they host Dallas on Sunday night, which I hate to count as a win, but Dallas doesn't look too good as of recently. Mm-hmm. Man, if they can get past the next 2 games and you're 5-0, now you're getting toward the trade deadline. Yep. They have money under the cap, and you start to sit there and think, hey, is there a team out there like Raiders with Devontae Adams or a team that just isn't doing that well?
Right.
Could the Steelers pick up a number 2 receiver? Yeah. And that right now seems to be the glaring hole on, hey, this is a playoff team. Could they be even more? So you never know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens if they keep winning like this.
I think the Steelers are in for good. And I said that way back in the summer. You could see how the pieces were coming together for them. I think they're looking at a real good season.
Some people are calling them potentially the most complete team right away. Yeah. I like where they're going. I'm a little nervous about their injuries. And again, they don't have receiver depth. But, man, if they can get a second receiver, look out. I mean, this could be a really good year for them.
Yep.
You never know. Well, we're about time, but we overlooked a team we got to talk about for a minute or two. The Ohio State Buckeyes. Interesting game over the weekend. Yeah. Marshall scored first, and Marshall's a little shaky coming in. Ohio State found their legs. Obviously, they're much more talented team than Marshall. They ended up winning the game 49-14. Mike, they shut out Western Michigan. They've got the talent where it's possible to totally dominate teams, but again, so far their schedule's been pretty easy. But are you concerned about anything I mean, again, they beat Marshall 49-14. So, I mean, it's not like they came close to losing the game. But do you see any concern moving forward, or you think they're in good shape?
None whatsoever. The question marks I had were their interior line blocking after I watched them in week one, but that's been answered positively the last couple weeks. And Judkins gives them a dimension that they didn't have in the tackle box before as was running. Where I think Henderson's more of a great guy outside the tackles. Judkins is both. He can run between the tackles. He's a guy who can get you that 4th and 1, that 3rd and 1, something like that. That's the one question mark I have with them going into the year, and I think that's been answered positively. And man, that offense is impressive. Woo, man, they got talent all over that field. And no, I think they're right where I would hope they would be at this point in the season, Chris.
If I'm Ryan Day, here's the quote I would have. I always liked Hall of Fame coach Phil Jackson. He would say this to his great Bulls and Lakers teams: don't be afraid of greatness. And I think the Buckeyes are definitely good enough to be a national champion.
Oh, I do
And
too.
again, if they beat Marshall by 42 or 35, that's not the big thing. It's just, can you maintain? Don't have phases where things don't go quite as well. Like you saw a little bit with Akron, you saw a little bit with Marshall. You going in to play Michigan State, you're a much better team. You should win by 3-4 touchdowns.
Yeah, they should.
But don't be afraid of greatness, because if you goof around for a little bit, you're still going to beat Michigan State. But man, when you get to like the Oregons and potentially Penn States, it could bite you. So don't be afraid of greatness. Really kind of stick it to teams when you can.
It should be a great year watching the Buckeyes.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds good. Well, Mike, I am up against it. I've got an appointment coming up, but it's always great to talk to you. Again, check us out. We're going to share some of this more broad content on View from the Pew. Again, you can see it on any of our social networks. I'll share some links you can share on his. And always keep up with us at Mahoney Matters. Lots of great stuff going on with high school football coverage and Youngstown State coverage as well. For Mike, this is Chris. Thanks for checking us out. Have a great day, everybody.